Welcome to Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show, a podcast where nostalgia comes alive. Together, Jake and his friends interview talents varying from actors, directors, writers, producers, composers, puppeteers, and so much more. Who will they be chatting with today? Find out in this Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show episode.
Hi everybody, welcome to another episode of Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show, where nostalgia comes alive. I am one of your co-hosts, Marty Monster, with Matt Bingle. Hi folks, how you doing? And with our co-hosts, Chris Bixby and Wyatt McCullough, and our host, Jake Deffenbaugh. How you doing?
We are great. How are you?
How are you doing? Doing fantastic. Fantastic. Thank you for asking.
That's awesome. Great. Who we got today, Matt, Marty?
I'm glad you asked. We're pretty excited about this one.
Yep.
Very unique episode. We've had husband and wife guests in the past, but this is the first time we've actually had them separately. He is the husband of previous guest Stephanie DeBruzzo, who was a wonderful guest.
Yes.
He's a writer and an author, and he currently has a book coming out called Sam and Friends: The Story of Jim Henson's First Television Show, in stores September the 24th. Please welcome Craig Shemin. Craig, happy to have you here.
Well, it's great to be here.
Hey, that's
happy to have you here.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Now, we know who you are, but for those who don't know, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
No, I'd rather not. Yeah.
First person to say that.
Yeah. I'm Craig Shemin. I used to work for the Muppets. I started out as a staff writer. I started out as a public relations assistant, and I was so bad at that they promoted me to staff writer. And then I was at the Henson Company for about 14 years, and then I went freelance, and I've worked for Disney and Nickelodeon, Cartoon Network, and a whole bunch of different companies. But I've always been involved with the Henson history, even after I left the company. I serve as president of the Jim Henson Legacy, and I wrote the Muppet Character Encyclopedia for Disney. Yeah. And you mentioned the new book coming out, Sam and Friends. So I try to do a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
Nice. Really nice. So can you talk a little bit about kind of your background and how you grew up?
Sure. I grew up, I was born in the Bronx, New York. But when I was 5 years old, we moved to the suburbs of New Jersey. And so I had a very typical suburban upbringing in a small community in northern New Jersey. And it was a pretty ordinary public school education, and nothing particularly unique about it. And that's where I came from. I went to elementary school, public school, high school in New Jersey, and then I went to Northwestern University for college, as did Stephanie, my wife, who you mentioned. But we were not there at the same time. We had friends that overlapped, but I'm 5 years older than Stephanie, so we were not quite there at the same time.
Nice.
Can you talk a bit about how you got into writing and producing?
Yeah. I originally, when I was really little, I didn't want to be a writer necessarily. I wanted to be a paramedic because TV show Emergency was very popular when I was growing up. Everybody wanted to be John or Roy. And, if you happen to watch some of the reruns on Cozy, you'll see how exciting that was.
Yeah.
But I didn't really see that as a future because I didn't like the sight of blood. So it wasn't until I was in high school and I started to do some writing, and I wrote an original musical when I was in high school, and that really got me interested in wanting to follow it as a possible career.
There you go.
Nice, really nice.
Yeah. Who are some of your inspirations?
It's interesting. Certainly the Muppets. When I was, little, the Muppet Show premiered when I was about 10 years old. So that was really, a great time to have that influence. But I also love, Billy Wilder. His storytelling is hilarious. Jack Benny. So the three for me were the Muppets, Jim Henson and Jerry Jewell, and Jack Benny and Billy Wilder, and that's sort of the comedic timing influences that have been, coming after me for a long time.
There you go.
Nice, really nice. So on the subject of Jim Henson, how did you get started working for the Jim Henson Company?
It's a really I just called them. I was trying to figure out. I was a big fan when I was like 10 or 11, and then I sort of followed it for a while. I used to go to the library back when people would go to the library to do research before there was an internet, and I would look up newspaper and magazine articles, see how everything was done. And then, I was into it for several years, and then I sort of, let it sort of slip aside when I was in high school. And then I was in college, and when I was a junior, I was trying to figure out if I could do a summer internship. And I was watching TV in my dorm, and they were airing this documentary on PBS called Henson's Place.
Oh, wow.
Nice.
That's
when, I'm watching that, and they had a lot of footage of Jim working in the office and all the people that were around him. And I said, well, gee, that could be an interesting place to work. I wonder if they do internships. So the next day I called, I got, information on the phone, and called up to get the number for Henson Associates. And I talked to someone there, and I asked for the person in charge of internships, and they put me in touch with the person. And then the next couple of weeks, I was home on spring break, and I went in for an interview, and I ended up getting an internship in the public relations department.
Nice.
Oh, wow.
That's awesome.
Wonderful. Now, what was the experience like meeting and working with Jim Henson himself?
Mm-hmm.
It was really amazing. He was. I was very intimidated by him, but he did nothing to intimidate people. He was very laid back. The first day I met him was the company softball game.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
So
Awesome.
he came up and introduced himself to me because he didn't recognize who I was, and he knew everybody in the company. And so he started a conversation, and we chatted a little bit, and then he borrowed my glove to play because he didn't have one. We were on opposite teams. So every time we switched sides, we'd hand the glove back. And then at the end of the day, I got him to sign it. And then
Wow, that's awesome.
Wow.
That's so cool.
I had Frank Oz sign it.
Oh, wow.
That's awesome.
And so I think I may have the only game-used autographed Jim Henson baseball glove.
Wow.
There you go.
Whoa.
That
That's
is
an
awesome.
amazing story.
Yeah, we've had a ton of different people on who have a lot of wonderful stories from working with
Yeah.
Jim.
With Jim.
Gotta go crazy.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it's. I was just getting to the point of being semi-comfortable being in the room with him when he passed away. And only a few weeks before he passed away, I was down when they were shooting the Muppets at Walt Disney World.
Oh, wow.
And
Yes.
I sat right opposite him at the catering, tent for meal break, and he was really enjoying the chocolate brownies. He was, really loving them, and it was just, it's like, oh boy, it's a regular guy. But when you walked, we shot that on location down at Disney World,
Right.
So when you saw Jim walking around Disney World, it was kind of like you're seeing what it was like when Walt Disney walked around, because wherever Jim went, people would just sort of follow him. Even, he was going off to go to the bathroom, and there was just like a little flock of people just because he was Jim Henson, and people wanted to see what he was doing. And it was really an amazing thing.
That's awesome.
Wow.
That's just amazing. So one of your first jobs within the company is working with the Jim Henson archives. Can you talk a bit about that?
Sure. There wasn't really a whole department. Jane Henson kind of set up the archives and had Bob Payne running it. And Bob Payne worked on Sam and Friends. He was a guy who went to school with Jim, and he was hired by Jim to help Jane run Sam and Friends when Jim went off to Europe. and he had sort of been in and out of Henson ever since 1958. But so he had worked. He didn't move up with Jim to New York initially, but then he came up and worked on Sesame Street and Muppet Show and Dark Crystal and things. And so he was sort of a company historian because he had been, he went back so far. So he was, before I got there, he was sort of put in charge of putting together the archives. And then I came in and my responsibility was just to sort of keep things coming in, make sure people weren't throwing things out, because my full-time job was to answer the phones in the public relations department. They didn't have a budget to have a full-time archivist. So I would just sort of gather things, and, I tried to get, I started getting the acid-free materials to store archival things in, and started making lists of what we had. But it wasn't until Karen Falk came in and really set things up that there was an established department. At that time, archives was just sort of a subdivision of the public relations department.
Nice. So now after, of course, you mentioned like when Jim Henson passed away, after he passed, you had a brief puppeteering role in the Muppets Celebrate Jim Henson special.
I did. You've done your research. Yeah,
we do our research.
Yes.
I was interested in puppetry. I did a puppet project in college, not as successful as the one that Stephanie did, but I built some puppets, and I was trying to figure out where in the Henson Company I was going to sort of try to get to. And I remember sitting down with Jane Henson, and she was giving me good advice. And she was saying, I see you're building puppets of your own, and it's really good. But if you want to work in the Henson shop, you really want to make sure that that's what you do. Because once they train you to build puppets in the Henson shop, they don't want to lose you. So it's harder to switch out of the Henson workshop at that time than anything else. Yeah. So, but I started, doing puppetry because, I had a little bit of experience doing it in college, and I was invited to go to some of the Henson workshops. We were doing a photo that was originally intended to be given to Disney once if the merger had closed, to sort of demonstrate how the Muppets work. And the picture ended up getting used, I think, in the Works book. But it was a picture of two puppeteers. It was Camille Benora and David Rudman, and we had set up how it was done. And the picture was taken by I think it was John Barrett. But the whole idea was we're going to take this picture and then we're going to put diagrams to illustrate how things are work. Did I make a noise? Okay. I'm sorry. I hit my microphone.
That's okay. That's all right.
That's all right. It's okay.
You can edit that part out flawlessly.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
So while they were setting up the camera and stuff, we had a live video camera as part of it. So I put on Puppet just to help the photographer set up the shot. And I started puppeteering a little bit. And Dave Rudman's looking at it and say, "Hey, you're pretty good. I'm going to tell Kevin about you." So then the next day, Kevin Clash came by my desk and said, "I understand you're a puppeteer." So he invited me to come to his next workshop. And that was just about the time that they were getting ready to do the TV special. So he put me on a list of background puppeteers. But it was sort of in the back row. So Duncan Kenworthy, who was one of the early producers of Fraggle Rock, he was Statler, I was Waldorf. And that was
that's awesome.
That's amazing.
And I think Cheryl Henson was in our row, and Bill Prady, and it was like, it's one of those situations where it's basically anybody who can lift up their arm gets called in to do it. So I did Waldorf, and then I did a penguin, and that's the extent of my real puppetry experience for Henson. I've done a couple little things here and there, but
there you go. Yeah. That's awesome.
So, one of your earliest writing credits is an episode of the Nick Jr. series Go Go Island. What was it like working on that?
It was cool. I didn't get to go to the shoot. It was shot down in Orlando, but it was my first guild project, a Writers Guild project. So it was exciting to get my guild card and to spend most of what I was making on it to pay my initiation fee into the Writers Guild. But I learned a lot. You learn that it's quite a process, and that it was the first time I really got the experience that this first draft that I'm writing is not necessarily going to be what ends up going on television. You get used to that very early on. But it was, there was a great writer I worked with on that named Kaz Hyman, and he taught me a lot. But it was a very, it was a very quick experience. One episode. And
amazing episode, by the way.
Yeah,
I know me and Chris and Jakey and Matt are all fans of God. It's just amazing.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I did get to meet Ron and Natalie, and they're wonderful people.
yeah.
Nice. We previously had Shayna on.
Oh yeah,
Shayna's awesome.
It's a very awesome episode.
So another show that you worked on was Wubbulous World of Dr. Seuss. What was it like working as a writer and consultant on the first season of that?
It was challenging because we were Dr. Seuss wrote 40 books in 40 years.
Yeah.
And we were doing 20 episodes in, 6 to 8 months or however long it took. So it was fun, but it was also a lot of late nights because you want to try and make it as good as possible.
Yeah.
So it was a very fun team. David Stephen Cohen was our executive producer, head writer, and I worked a lot with Will Ryan, who passed away recently. And Will was a guy who did a little bit of everything in his career. He was primarily a cartoon voice artist, but he was a composer. He was a writer. And we sat and wrote a bunch of episodes together and just tried to figure out ways to sort of sneak out and do other things,
There you go.
We were, one day we said, let's go over to the licensing show, which, it used to be in New York. Now it's in Vegas. And this was a show where all the companies that had franchises and licenses to sell would gather in the showroom, and they'd show all these different characters that you could license. So we're like, hey, look, there's, Buffalo Bob Smith and Howdy Doody are there. And, and there's a Popeye booth, and there's like all of these things, because once, even if it's not a popular character, once they develop a character, they're trying to, there's always going to be they're hoping some sort of nostalgic audience. So, it was a very interesting mix of new characters and properties, and then older characters, and and all of this was also very inspiring to us in some ways. To you never knew where you were going to get an idea for an episode.
Yeah.
Nice. Do you have like a favorite episode of Wubbulous?
I think I do. I mean, there was an episode called "The Road to Kalari."
Nice.
And that was an episode that was, Will Ryan and I wrote that together. And it was a situation where we were called in to rewrite somebody else's episode that had to be done in a certain amount of time. So we did that, and it left us very little time to write The Road to Kalari, which was what we were supposed to be doing. And we basically wrote Road to Kalari in a day and a half because of this, rather than taking several days to do it. And then we were very surprised when that episode, Road to Kalari, got nominated for a Writers Guild Award.
Oh, wow.
There were 3 episodes nominated of Wubbulous World of Dr. Seuss that year, out of the 5 nominees. So we were one of them.
Wow.
And,
really
Nice.
And the pilot was one. And then Alan Newworth and his partner, Gary Cooper, wrote an episode that was nominated too. So that, I think, because it's sort of, it was a fun episode to write. There's fun songs in it. And then also the guy who was in charge of Dr. Seuss Enterprises, a man named Herb Chayette, he was the guy who would have to sign off on all of the story outlines before we wrote them. So I remember that when we sent him that summary, he wrote back. This was back in the old days, so it was a fax. The fax came back, and he just wrote on the outline and said, "Ted would have liked this." And that was sort of like we knew that we were on the right track. So it was a lot of fun to do.
Nice.
There you go. And the show's out on DVDs and VHS. I actually do have one of the DVDs, and you're actually credited on the DVD, which is cool.
It is cool, but they didn't. They ended up. I think they ended up stopping doing that. They stopped doing that eventually because sometimes the credits didn't match what the episodes had. Because whoever sometimes they were just sort of figure, those credits are the same, and they're not.
Yeah.
So whoever was doing the artwork didn't really pay attention, and they figured rather than try and make them accurate, they just won't put them on at all.
There you go.
Because that way, they can't be wrong.
Yeah,
so I am very happy whenever I see one that does have my name on it.
Yeah, and I'm kind of curious because there are so many. But do you have a favorite character from the show?
I like all of them, but I do like Seuss New, which was performed by my wife Stephanie.
Yeah,
because it was one of the fun things about that episode, and also, so this was the second episode that Seuss New was in, and I think Will Ryan may have come up with the name Seuss New, which was actually Seuss New. It was a new Seuss character, so he just named her Seuss New.
Oh, that's amazing.
That's awesome.
And the Queen of Calari was named after, it was Regina, the Queen of Calari. And one of our writer's assistants on Wubbulous World was named Regina Calari. So we just made her Regina, the Queen of Calari, and then she got married, so that's not her name anymore. But
that's awesome.
There was another writer's assistant was Marcello Picone, so he became Prince Marcello Picone. I think he was mentioned in that episode. So we're trying to just sort of get little Easter eggs in there for our staff.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Nice.
That's awesome.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is really nice.
So a couple years after Wubbulous World, you co-wrote for the Muppet Show Live at the iconic Hollywood Palace in 2001. What was that like? 'Cause the Muppet Show was huge back then.
Well,
it still is now.
Yeah, the Muppet Show actually wasn't quite huge back then. It was huge earlier. This was still fairly, because the Muppet Show was like 20 years earlier, but it was in reruns.
Yeah.
But it started out as it was just going to be a small little show. It was coinciding with the Muppet Fest, which was the first
that's right.
fan convention. And at first it was just going to be this quiet little concert to culminate Muppet Fest, and it was going to be, I think it was planned to be held on the Henson lot in which is the Chaplin Studios, and they said we'll just have it on the soundstage, and we're going to have Paul Williams perform, and we're going to have just a little bit of a performance, and then it kept getting bigger. And they were like, well, we can't really fit it in the soundstage anymore. Let's find a theater. So they found the Hollywood Palace, which was then called, I think it was about to be renamed the Avalon. I'm not sure. But this was where they did the TV show that the Muppets had been on, Hollywood Palace, a couple times. So
that's
there
right.
was a historic connection. And then it just kept getting bigger, because originally it wasn't supposed to be a real version of the Muppet Show. But then we were like, well, let's make it the Muppet Show. Let's do this, and let's have the song, and let's do this, and let's do that. And, we had the other Ray Charles, who was one of the music guys on the Muppet Show. He led the band, and his son did all the arrangements. And we had this little, great band on stage. And Martin Baker, who was a longtime Henson producer, he was sort of line producing this whole thing. And, we talked to Martin. It's like, hey, how hard would it be to, create a new Muppet Show curtain with the logo on it? And he's like, he made a couple of calls, and the next day we had this Muppet Show curtain that they had painted. And, it just started getting bigger, and we need guest stars. Well, okay, we got Brooke Shields, and we were supposed to have Lionel Richie, and then he dropped out at the last minute.
That sucks.
We got John Voight, and it was like it turned into this sort of ridiculous thing. And I wrote that with Jim Lewis, and we kept on just sort of like writing the Muppet Show that we would want to see.
Yeah.
And, the sad thing was only, it was done once. It was live. There is a tape of what we did, but it was never intended to be shown anywhere. So it's sort of locked up. But it was a great experience.
Nice. And I know Elmo even made it like a little guest spot in the finale too, which is cool.
Yeah, at that point, it wasn't as hard to do that, because I think at that point the Henson the Sesame Street characters, I think, were still owned by Henson, and the Muppets were still owned by Henson. So we didn't have to really ask permission to make that happen. Later on, when we did concerts for Carnegie Hall in New Zealand, we were able to do that.
Right.
That's awesome.
Right. So now this may be a difficult question, but do you have like an overall favorite Muppet project you've worked on?
It changes.
Yeah.
I think one of my favorite projects was the Muppet CD-ROM.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I didn't even know you did that.
Muppets Inside it was called.
Yeah.
And it was fun because I got to do a lot without a lot of input from other people, because no one else understood what it was that we were doing. The whole idea of this video game, or the CD-ROM game, was fairly new. So I would send the script out to my boss, and he'd be puzzled by it. He'd say, well, I guess it's right, but there's an ending on page 10, and then it goes on for another 400 pages, so I'm not quite sure what this means.
Yeah.
But so I think that was really a lot of fun, and won awards and stuff. But I also, I enjoyed doing a lot of projects. I mean, the live concerts that I was a part of, doing the first Muppet Show live, and also the Carnegie Hall in New Zealand, those were a lot of fun, because when you're writing it and you also get to see it performed live in front of an audience, that's an amazing thing, as opposed to doing the CD-ROM where you're in a series of little booths, and the Muppets are not necessarily recording all at the same time.
Yeah.
Then, sort of have to wait for years to see how it all gets put together. It's not the same as the instant response from an audience.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
And speaking of the Muppets, in 2014, you wrote the Muppets Character Encyclopedia. How did that come about for you?
They called me. It was Jim Lewis, who is sort of the staff editorial writing person at Muppet Studios these days. We used to work together when he was at Henson, and they approached him to do it, and he said that he really wasn't the right person. He recommended me, and Jim would serve as sort of the editorial consultant on behalf of Disney.
Yeah,
and I would write it. So that it just came out of the blue. I didn't pitch it or pursue it, and then it was it was a very fast project, because it had to be out on a certain date. They had a release date to coincide with the Muppets Most Wanted. I think it was coming out then.
Yeah, that movie is good. The songs in there are amazing.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it had to be written in like 2 or 3 months. So that was a very fast project.
Yeah, I can definitely tell that was challenging.
Hey, so I know you also worked on a show called Telling Stories with Tomie dePaola. Can you share any funnest memories you have from working with Tomie?
He was wonderful. He really was. Yeah. And after when we were doing the Dr. Seuss show, we knew that Ted Geisel, Dr. Seuss, probably wouldn't like what we were doing just because, he wasn't involved. And, he sort of had this history of not being happy with adaptations that he wasn't involved in.
Yeah.
And when we did the show with Tomie, we were actually in the room with him, developing new ideas for new Stregonona stories and new segments. And he was just a delight. And then, so we worked with him in pre-production when we were writing. And then I got to go out because the show was done in sort of segments. They call it banking. So all of the Stregonona stories were shot, and then all of the 26 Fairmount, which was the little kid, those were done, I think, in the afternoons or in the mornings, because the kid could only work a certain amount of hours. So they'd shoot that against the blue screen, then they'd move the cameras over and shoot Stregonona in the afternoon after lunch. And then after all of that was done, they built the set and for Tomie and did his host segments. So I wasn't on set for Stregonona or 26 Fairmount. That was covered by the two other writers. But then they brought me out to work on the host segments with Tomie. We did that for a few weeks. And that was just an amazing time. He was very natural on camera, had a great personality for the camera. And we would go out afterwards. He would take us out for dinner at, we went to drinks one night at Chateau Marmont down Sunset Boulevard. And it was just a wonderfully positive experience. And he was really enjoying himself. So it was a hard show to do because it was just, this part of it was basically him and John Kennedy playing his puppet sidekick. So it was a lot of sort of repetitive segments that kind of end up looking, if you were, because they're not being broken up with anything else when we're shooting it, it kind of, it's like, what are we doing? It's the same as the last one, or, it's a different episode, but it's the same. So, it's a tough project to do, but it was great fun to work with him.
I bet. And
I think it's been almost 2.5 years since we lost him too.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
He was on Barney as well as.
Yeah, and I think that was how Henson came up with the idea to do the show. They saw him on Barney, and he had his own little sort of lecture thing that they did on video, and that was Henson saw it. I was like, well, no, we could put a television show around him, and they did.
Yeah, rest in peace.
Yeah.
We do miss him.
And all of us are big Barney fans.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Speaking of John Kennedy, we previously had him on.
Yeah, we did.
Yes, we did.
John's terrific.
Yes, we did.
We need him back.
We've had a lot of cool puppetry folks on. We've had Marty Robinson, of course. We mentioned earlier Stephanie.
Yeah.
Ricky
Bruce
Boyd.
Lenoir.
Ricky Boyd.
Bruce Lenoir.
Tyler Bunch.
I've worked with all these people. Yeah.
So many characters. You just go back and look in our
There's
archive
probably a few we're
videos.
missing. Yeah, there's probably a few.
There's a lot. I feel like we're missing. Mike Grierson.
Yeah, no, we've had a lot of wonderful people on. So
sure.
Another thing I wanted to bring up is I know you were also a part of the recent Sesame Street GalaxyCon panel, the virtual one that happened.
That's right. Yes.
What was that like getting talk to everyone? And
it was fun. It was interesting because Kevin Clash called me up one day and asked if I would do it because I do a lot of moderating of panels and things. And he thought since I knew everyone involved that he wanted me to do it. And it was fun. It was very quick. Those things are sort of almost over before they begin.
Yeah.
But it's always fun to see that group because when I was, Sesame Street premiered when I was like 3 years old. So that was my first, I was in that first sort of Sesame Street class. So seeing the real people is still very special to me, even though I've known them for a long time, but there's still something really cool that happens when you meet them. And, we just had a screening at the Museum of the Moving Image in honor of Emilio Delgado, played Lucy.
Yes. That's right.
And
Yes.
he was just the
Great
sweetest
person.
guy, and all of those people take their role on Sesame Street so seriously, and they know what
you
it
could tell.
means to the fans.
Yeah, and Jerry Nelson too. It's been recently. It just turned 10 years since we lost him.
Yeah.
And it was Jerry when we were doing our concert at Carnegie Hall. Jerry was fairly sick by then. He was kind of going in and out of the hospital, dealing with his COPD. But we were doing this Jim Henson. It's a magical world, I think, a musical world, we called it at Carnegie Hall. And John Tartaglia and I were working together, putting it on. And
nice.
I was writing it and John was directing it. And we sort of said, it'd be great if we could get Jerry to do the Muppet Show announcer, to record him doing the announcing at the top of the show. And we called up Jerry, and he was happy to do it. And he's like, I have a Sesame Street recording session that I'm doing up here in Cape Cod. We can tack it on at the end of that. That's not a problem. We'll do that. So I get in touch with the recording studio, and we set up everything. And, they patch you in on the phone to listen, So they patched me in, and I could hear the tail end of what he was doing on Sesame Street. And, he finished it, and then it you could hear him sort of struggling. And it was just, and I started feeling really bad that I was getting Jerry to, he must be really in pain, or, it's just, I started feeling guilty that I was doing this to him. And, we so they patched me in after he finished, and we're talking a little bit, and it was the very, very small voice from Jerry, which is not like him. And he was like, okay, I think I understand. It's like, okay, this is a roll tape. Welcome to Carnegie Hall. And, in like a second, it sounded exactly like his Muppet Show announcer voice. And we did a couple of takes of that, and it was done. So he was just sort of really preserving his, his energy.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
And then he came to see the show. And, it was funny because he watched, I think, our first concert that had a lot of technical problems. And I go to see him afterwards. I meet him in the box that we had gotten for him. And the first thing he's like, I have a few notes.
I think I remember hearing about that. Yeah, that there were some technical issues during that.
Yeah, the second one was a little smoother, but the problem had what had happened. What we were told is that a lot of the lighting and sound cues get programmed into a computer, and they can be saved. So once you do it in the rehearsal, they save it, and then the computer is supposed to do it automatically. You just put in the cue and it's supposed to do it. And like something got unplugged, so all of the saved cues were not in the computerized board.
Oh boy!
So they were scrambling to sort of do everything by hand, and that's what they told us happened.
There you go.
That's funny. It's funny though.
It's funny.
Yeah.
Imagine how funny that must have been.
Yeah. Didn't they have like what was it, some archival audio that they used for the Muppets 2011 movie of Jerry? I think you might be right on that.
I
think
believe.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Somebody correct us on this in the comments or something.
I think so. I think I've read somewhere they used archival footage from Jerry.
Yeah. I mean, they have his announcer is in it. So
yeah.
It's possible that they may have had the movie was done in 2010 or 2011.
Yeah.
So it's quite possible they were
2010. So
so they may have been able to have him actually record it for the movie.
Oh,
that's a nice
Nice
behind the scenes fact.
I'm not sure, but I believe
We're not
they
sure.
have his character saying it's the Muppet Telethon, so it would have been
right.
It would have had to. I
Yeah,
don't know if he ever said
maybe.
that.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe. So you've also created and wrote some interstitial series for Playhouse Disney, for example, Lulu Safety Patrol, as well as Tasty Time with ZeFronk. How did those two series come about?
Originally, the Lou and Lou Safety Patrol was something else that I got a invite from one of the executives there who I don't know how I met her. I think I worked with her briefly on something else, but I'm not sure. But she invited me to pitch ideas for shows and interstitials. And I sent her a bunch of ideas that I had come up with. And then I sent her a couple of pages out of a magazine story that I had done for a children's magazine called Harvey Magazine. And it was the completely homemade adventures of two twins named Max.
Oh, wow.
That was Maxwell and Maxine, and they made activities and toys together. So the thing was a feature. It's like, they make this game. This is how you can make a game at home. And for some reason, she really responded to that particular thing. And she said, well, we'll develop this into a show. So it went into development, and the way it works is that it often takes just months and months just to get the deal finished. So while they were about to finalize my deal for the purchase of this property, or the option with the option to purchase the property, I get a call from this executive, and she says, well, guess what? We are changing our format a little bit. We're changing the what Playhouse Disney is doing, and we've decided that if we continue, we still want to be, we've made this deal with you. We'll finish it, but if we develop it the way you pitched it, it's probably not going to get on the air because it doesn't meet with what we need to do at this point. And I'm not sure exactly what. Maybe it has something to do with they sell a lot of commercials to toys makers, and we do a show about making your own stuff. Maybe that's not what they want to do. But I think it had more to do with having more of a message that would be a little more education content in the interstitials.
Yeah. So
she said, we need something about safety. We have a bunch of things in development, but we don't have a safety show. And if you can turn Max and Max into a safety show, I can almost guarantee it will get on the air. But if you want to keep it developing it the way you have, I can guarantee it won't get on the air. And I'm like, oh, we're going to do a safety show. And it got turned into two twins. We ended up changing it to first Sam and Sam, and then it was Lou and Lou, because there are clearance issues that have to be dealt with if they can't clear the use of a name if someone already has a copyright or a trademark.
Yeah.
So it became Lou and Lou Safety Patrol. And it became, awesome. Instead of two kids making their own toys, it's two kids sort of playing Dragnet and finding safety violations.
That's awesome.
And that's how that happened. And then we did 20 episodes, and then we did a 21st episode that was, most of them were 3 minutes. We did one extra 2-minute one in the middle of a flu epidemic, and we did. I emailed them and said, we could do an episode about hand washing and trying to not get sick, and it was called Lou and Lou Don't Get the Flu. And Disney was very energetic about that. They found much budget. We put, the show had not been in production for a while, so they got, the voices back. We got everybody together, and we recorded that and animated that and got it on the air really in record time.
Yeah.
And then after that, it was, I did not create Tasty Time with ZeFronk. It was done by another artist, Ethan Long, and he created the show, and then they were looking for someone to write the episodes and develop it. He had done it as sort of a written pitch. And So because of the success I had with Lou and Lou, they had me do that. And that was really a lot of fun because one of the voices was Mark Hamill.
Oh wow.
Oh,
That was amazing.
Awesome.
that's
Amazing.
awesome.
Luke Skywalker.
Yep.
Yeah, he was terrific. And most of the time on all of those, Lou and Lou and for most of Tasty Time, I wasn't in the recording studio because they do that all in LA. I'm in New York, so they patched me through over the phone. But when we found out that we were probably not going to be doing any more ZeFronks, we were doing one more recording session, and I said, I'm going to go out for that one because I gotta meet Luke Skywalker. And it turned out I had a chance. I met him at a meeting earlier. So I already had met him, but I was like, I got to go watch him perform my stuff. And it's so much fun. He's such a wonderful guy.
Yeah.
Nice.
Hopefully in the
Nice.
future, if it's possible, we definitely have to have them on here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you also collaborated on various projects with your wife, which of course our previous guest Stephanie Abruzzo. How does it feel getting to work alongside her?
It's great. It's she's so good at what she does. And we have not had a chance to work on that many projects together. Whoops, I'm sorry that the door creaked open. So if you're
That's fine.
That's okay.
No worries.
Yeah, we haven't gotten a chance to work on that many projects together. But we always enjoy when we do. We worked on Wubbulous World.
Yeah.
And, every now and then we'll do something together. We worked on Ubi.
Yeah.
Love
Great
Yeah.
show.
Love Ubi.
And, it's fun. We definitely want to do more stuff together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Nice.
awesome. So currently you're the president of the Jim Henson Legacy. How did that come about?
Well, Jane Henson had started this organization as sort of a nonprofit to help celebrate Jim's work because, she felt confident that the companies that owned the various characters would do their part in keeping them alive and keeping them going. And, but she wanted an entity around to celebrate Jim as an individual artist. And this was shortly after Jim passed away. So the organization was also there to sort of receive communication from the public. People wanted to name things after Jim or, send an honor, or, have Jane accept something. So this organization was developed with that in mind. And then it evolved over the years and sort of taking custodianship of the Henson family's collection of puppets when the company changed hands at one point, and the puppets that were historic in nature were retained by Henson family as opposed to the company. So the Jim Henson Legacy was in charge of sort of finding homes for the puppets and working with Museum of the Moving Image and Center for Puppetry Arts. So early on, don't know exactly. I can't remember the actual year I joined, but early on, Jane knew that I was really interested in the history, and she invited me to serve on the board of trustees. So over the years, I was secretary, I was vice president, and eventually president, and then we still exist, and but primarily we are there to help the partner institutions that we've given. That the family has given puppets to. So we're there to support with programming the Center for Puppetry Arts and Museum of the Moving Image and the Smithsonian.
That's awesome.
And it's a lot of fun. I love doing, for many years we were doing a series of touring screenings.
Yeah.
And that's sort of my main role was to sort of put together these screenings and help present them in different places.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I know there was a screening of the Bear in the Big Blue House Christmas episode, which is amazing.
Yeah, it's very rare Christmas.
Great
Yes.
episode.
Yeah, so now as a writer and producer, of course, there must be some challenges. What challenges would you say you faced during your career?
It's just trying to make everything work because you're trying to deal with it. It's not just enough to tell a story and to have the script working and to have your characters right. If you were writing a book, that's all you need to worry about. You got to get the story and you got to get it on paper. But once you're dealing with television, whether it's puppetry or animation or live action, you have all these other elements to deal with, in terms of, do you have the budget to do this? Do you have, even when you're not thinking about, the specifics, when we were doing the animated version of Dog City, for example,
Oh, wow.
this had puppetry segments that were wrapped around animated segments. And when we started doing this, Jim Lewis and I wrote the original pilot, and the animation company Nelvana said, we at that time we didn't have a lot of experience working in animation, and Nelvana told us, oh, you're going to love working in animation because you can do anything. Anything's possible in animation. So we were, hey, that's great. You can do anything. So I don't know if it was in the pilot or in a later script, but I wrote a sequence that had a row of dancing girls or dancing dogs that would run across the screen, and submitted the script. And then I get a call from the animation producer. It's like, you can't do that. I'm like, what happened to anything? Well, you know how long it takes to draw a row of dancing girls? We'll be here all day drawing dancing girls. I'm like, so I can't do anything. Well, it's you can do anything that we can draw easily. I was like, can't you just draw one dancing girl and Xerox it across the room? So that was sort of, so you're thinking about things like that, the reality of how many puppeteers do you have? Who needs right hands? Can they stuff a hand? Can they pin a hand? You get, I'm working on a project now for Disney. It's a part of the D23 Expo that's coming up.
Oh,
And,
nice.
we're dealing with, the logistics of, how do you get them on stage? How do you get them off stage? We have to, well, let's roll a clip. And while the audience watching the clip, we can change, so you're dealing with much more than just telling a story. You're dealing with the physical challenges of production.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
So what piece of advice would you give to anyone who wants to get into writing and producing?
Well, I think the biggest thing I can say is just do a lot of writing and rewriting.
There you go.
Because a lot of people have come to me over the years and say, how do I get a job as a writer? And I'm like, well, what have you done? What have you written? Oh, I haven't really done anything yet. I want to get a job as a writer. And like, you got to show what you can do.
Right.
You have to write either spec scripts or original material, and you need to sort of, make sure it's good.
Because if you're going to get hired as a writer, people, they need to see your work.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Your resume
yeah.
as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's as I mentioned Billy Wilder earlier as an influence, and there's a movie he did called Kiss Me Stupid. And it's, not as well known a movie, but it's Ray Walston and Dean Martin as himself, or a version of himself. And there's a line that Dean Martin says that's sort of very true. In the movie, he says, if you got what it takes, sooner or later, somebody's going to take what you got. And that's sort of what, that's the essence of it. You got to get good at it. And in order to get good at it, you got to do it over and over again. And it's when people are hiring, they don't want that to be happening on their dime, so to speak. They want you to have already learned and made your mistakes before you get to them. So I think that, that's the advice, is do a lot of writing, and do a lot of revising, and just remember that it's always going to be rewritten, either by you or by someone else. Don't get too attached to your first draft, because it's going to change.
Definitely going to be rewritten.
Okay, so another thing I wanted to briefly mention is you mentioned working on Cartoon Network. You wrote a couple episodes of Courage the Cowardly Dog.
I wrote, I think it was 6 or 7 episodes. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Nice. So was that like, work on that one?
It was a lot of fun. It's John Dilworth, who created that show. He is wonderfully crazy. He has an incredible imagination, and the way that those episodes were done is David Stephen Cohen worked on that as sort of the head writer or story editor, and we would, I would pitch, I'd write up some very brief, what we would call story springboards or premises. And it was just like a quick paragraph. And on that show, we went in and met. So, you'd bring in the premises, and if John Dilworth responded to one of them, then it just sort of turned into this freewheeling writing session where, we just talk out the beats of the story and what it should be doing. And then I went off and wrote the drafts. And then what was kind of fun on that is that John wanted you to be as specific as possible in the writing. There are some shows where they just want you to write the dialogue and not do a lot of direction on what's happening visually. But John wanted to have as much input from the writer as possible, whether or not he was going to use it. So we would try and be very visual and paint the pictures in the scripts. And then he would send you your outline back. He had a process that he called dillying. So once it was dillied, he would send it back to you. And the dilly process was he would basically do little tiny mini thumbnail storyboards in the margin of your outline.
Nice.
Sort of to give, because that would go to the writer and it would also go to the storyboard artist. Mm-hmm. So he would do that, I think, either on the outline or on the script. I think he would do notes on the outline, but the dilly process, I think, was on mostly on the script. So once it was dillied, you would do your next revision, and the storyboard artist would have John's direction on how to storyboard the show and what was happening visually. Nice. So I felt that a lot of what I was, putting into it ended up on the screen. But it was also weird because John would have these ideas that I hadn't really thought of. Will Ryan, there was one episode called The Duck Brothers, and Will Ryan ended up doing the voices of the Duck Brothers because he had known, I think he had known John from someplace else. So he was in town. He went and he was staying with me, and he went in to record it. And for some reason or other, I didn't go to that session. Excuse me. And Will came back and he said, "Oh, that was a lot of fun. It was a great idea to have the Duck Brothers sound like the Beatles." And I'm like, "What? Wait, I never said anything." Well, but it ended up being good for the show and for the characters. Yeah. But it was just weird that it was something that John came up with, and the next thing you know, that's what happens.
There you go. Mm-hmm. It's cool to think Courage is still around to this day. Like I know last year there was a Scooby and Courage crossover movie. Yeah,
one I will. I think that John would want me to say that's something that he had no involvement with whatsoever.
What? Oh, yeah. Somebody needs to talk to Warner Brothers about that. Then that's weird. I didn't even know that.
So now we've talked a lot about the stuff you've done in the past. So going to. I know you mentioned earlier you wrote a book all about Jim Henson's first television show, Sam and Friends.
Did I?
You sure did.
How nice of you to mention.
You sure did, which we briefly discussed when I had reached out to you. What kind of can you tell us about the upcoming book?
Well, it is available. I don't know when does the show drop, as they say?
September 21st, I think. So just
good.
before the book comes out.
Yeah. So it's available for order on the website at bearmanormedia.com.
Yeah.
But it was this was something that I had always been interested in, which was how did Jim Henson start out? What was the first project he did, knowing that, he was in high school and starting college when he did his earliest work. So I was always interested in Jim's earliest work and how does a kid who was in high school and starting college end up doing this and having it turn into something really special. And I had talked to Jane Henson over the years, and I'd watched kinescopes, the few surviving kinescopes that there are, and I was always fascinated by that story. And I had sat down with Jane and recorded some interviews a few years before she passed away, and I didn't know what we were going to do with them, but she loved talking about Sam and Friends because it was one part of Jim's career that she was actively involved in. The 60s came around and Jane was having children and staying at home and taking care of them. She was still part of the company, but not as involved on a daily basis. So Sam and Friends was a very special project to her. And for many years, I thought about what could we do? Is there a book there? And for many years, there really wasn't, enough material.
Yeah.
And then Karen Falk, who is the archivist of the Jim Henson Company, and it was amazing in helping put this book together. And she found so many great pieces of material and photos. But one of the things that she and her team found was a box of 44 reel-to-reel tapes that Jim had made recording the audio of Sam and Friends.
Wow.
Oh my gosh. That's
awesome.
amazing.
That's
So
awesome.
It's from
Really cool.
1958 to the end of the show.
Wow.
It's not every episode because he sort of stopped doing the ones that they had done before. And, so it was basically the original work. So that ended up being like 400 plus episodes on audio.
Wow.
Plus there was a collection of acetate recordings, these metal recordings that were done of the songs that they would use. And Jane kept a lot of those in her garage. So we had those, we had some scripts. So I approached Lisa Henson and the Henson Company to get permission to do this. And her first response was the same one that I had asked, is there enough material to do a book? And Karen assured her that there was. So they were very generous and gave me permission to do the book, as long as I got permission from Disney, because Sam and Friends is what they call a frozen property. And in order to do anything with it, it needs permission of both Henson and Disney. Yeah. So
there you go.
Disney gave me permission, Henson gave me permission, and then I was able to, it took about 3 years, a little bit more than 3 years of research, and then having to deal with the pandemic and all of that. And Frank Oz was kind enough to write the foreword for me.
Oh, yeah.
So it was just, I'm really proud of it. It's one of the things I'm most proud of, because in some ways it echoes Jim's career, because if you look at Sam and Friends, it's sort of the purest form of Jim's work, because there aren't a lot of other people between him and the audience. Later on, as he got more people working for him, he wasn't building all the puppets. He wasn't building the sets. He wasn't, writing all the scripts. He had enormous input into all of those. But on Sam and Friends, literally you saw his fingerprints on everything.
Mm-hmm.
So just like that is the situation with Jim, in this book, it's not like a television script I've written that has gone through many people and is interpreted and performed. This is, I've written it, and it's had, input from copy editors and stuff, but it's essentially what I've written gets seen by the audience with a lot of layers of people in between. So that is really exciting to me.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Very, very excited to check that out.
Yes, very excited about
Hopefully
that.
hopefully one
Have
day
I
I'll
mentioned
buy the
it's
book.
available on bearmanormedia.com?
No.
And we
Yep.
also have salmonfriendsbook.com.
Yes,
Nice.
that's right.
We'll put the links in the description for the fans of.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yes,
Yeah,
definitely.
of
So,
course.
yes, definitely. So it'll be out September.
24th.
Okay.
So this
I
one
was
goes
blanking
out
on the
20.
exact date.
This
Yes.
one
Which
goes
one-
out on the
what's-
20. You know what you do? The time you're watching this, it'll be out tomorrow for you guys when this comes out. September 23rd is when this comes out.
Well, there you go. So if
You can go get it tomorrow.
if you're in the New York area listening to this on the 23rd, come to see our book event on the 24th on Jim Henson's birthday. That's why we picked the 24th as
nice.
our
I
release
was
date.
just gonna say September 24th is Jim Henson's birthday.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so we're doing a
Perfect.
book launch at the Museum of the Moving Image in Queens.
Oh,
So there'll be
nice.
a screening,
Awesome.
including the world premiere. Well, it's been seen once, but there's a Sam and Friends episode that was just located when doing the research for this book. So we'll
Oh,
be
wow.
unveiling-
Wow.
Yes.
Really cool. Really cool.
Wow.
That is awesome.
And actually, we're actually not that far from the studios. We're like, what, 45 minutes? Something like that.
Yeah.
Matt will be up there.
I'm down.
Oh,
I'm
I'll-
down in Cape
I'll
Cod,
see ya.
Massachusetts. So I'm way too far.
I'm
Oh,
in-
so
I
you're
was
near
about to-
where Jerry Nelson.
Yeah.
I'm in Ohio.
we're closer to the original studio than the Museum of the Moving Image. Yeah.
And I'm in Maryland too. So
Oh yeah,
Yeah, I'm
we're
in
in Maryland.
Yeah.
Not saying what part, but I am in Ohio.
Where in Maryland, Jake? Yes.
yeah.
No, like what part of Maryland?
Yeah.
You want the
Yeah,
answer? I got
the-
this. He's in
the-
wants to be
the-
Maryland. You want
The area.
Boom, I answered
we're-
for you.
I'm- Yeah. I'm out in Hillthorpe in Baltimore County.
And Jason's in Leslie.
okay.
Pretty close to BWI.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Because that was Jim and Jane. Their first house, I think, was in Bethesda.
Wow.
And the what's funny is that you do the research for this book and you don't know what's going to come up.
Yeah.
And you're doing there's so many great sources online, and there was one database, I think it was like a National Archives thing or something like that, that had this affidavit presented from an architecture historian about this Baltimore subdivision, this Bethesda subdivision, where Jim and Jane's house was. And it was about apparently it was the builder was a historic person who put this, it was mid-century historic homes. And there was a little paragraph that the person who was selling these homes, the realtor, remembered Jim and Jane shopping for their house.
Oh wow!
Nice.
And,
Wow.
And not only that, but they said, well, they came and they were both wearing shorts. So it's like, that's something that you would not do if you were shopping around for a house in the late 1950s.
Yeah.
So she remembered not only they were wearing shorts, so they didn't think that they were serious buyers. And then they were also wondering if they were even suitable to buy a home in this upscale area. And then it turned out that, she went on to say that not only were they serious, but they paid cash when they bought the house. Jim and Jane by that time had the Wilkins commercials running. So there was
yeah.
Love those.
Yeah. Part of Maryland I live is Lusby. So
yeah, he's in
Nice.
Lusby. There you go.
So can you share any other projects you're working on now?
Besides the book,
Can I? There are a couple that I'm not allowed to talk about, but one of the ongoing ones that I do is there's a series of educational classical music concerts in New York called Little Orchestra Society. So for the past several years, like 7 or 8 years, I've been writing them, and then I started directing them a few years ago. So we're going to be starting our next season in the fall. And that's fun because, again, it's one of these projects where there's a live audience involved, so you can get immediate feedback on whether your jokes are working or not.
Nice.
That's awesome.
Great to hear.
Yeah, it is. So what would you like to say to your fans and supporters out there?
First of all, I would say I have fans and supporters.
Yeah, you got some right here. We're interviewing you.
Well, I appreciate it. But after I say that, I was like, well, I'm just, I think I would say that I'm as big a fan of the material. I came into this as a fan. Yeah. So I still consider myself first and foremost a Muppet fan. I've had a good time being able to not only work on a bunch of these projects, but being able to work with a lot of amazing people that I used to see in all of these behind the scenes documentaries,
Yeah.
Right.
Dave Goles and
yes.
Jerry Nelson.
Dave Goles,
yes.
And getting to meet Jim and to work with Frank. I've worked with Frank on a bunch of projects over the years. One of my regular gigs when I was working in Henson was writing for a lot of these TV talk show appearances and newspaper and magazine interviews of Miss Piggy. So he would write a lot of material for Piggy that Frank would then, go over and so I would end up seeing him an awful lot at like 4 a.m. when we would go to the Today Show or different things like that. And he's really, really amazing. When I asked him to do the foreword for my book, he gave me a yes in less than 2 hours, and I was prepared to sort of have to wear him down. I actually sent him an email where I imagined the conversation that we'd have back and forth. And none of it was necessary because, he sent me that conversation with his own responses to my planned responses of what he was going to say. And after the first one, he says, okay, I'll do it. And then the second one's like, I said I'll do it already. Oh, man, will you just stop? I said I'd do it, And he turned it into a gag.
Oh, my gosh.
There you go.
Yeah, back on the subject of the Sesame Street Galaxy Con, that dude cracked me up.
Oh, my gosh.
Yes, absolutely.
He's such a funny guy. He's such a funny guy.
Yeah.
Really is.
So if people want to... Huh?
I said amazing event because...
Oh, yeah, definitely. So if people want to contact you, where can people find you?
Well, they can go to either my website, craigshemin.com, or samandfriendsbook.com.
There you go.
And then, Craig Shemin on Twitter and Sam Friends Book on Twitter. You find it. All of the different social links are at samandfriendsbook.com.
We'll put all the links in below so everybody can check you out.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and check out the upcoming book. Yes.
Yeah.
Indeed. One day I can have it, like I said before. Anyways, to wrap this up.
Yeah, last question, Jakey. Here you go.
This podcast is called Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show. When you think of Nostalgia Show, when you think
of Nostalgia Show, what?
When you think of the Nostalgia Show, what do you think of? You think of us.
That's exactly right.
Take two.
You think of us.
You do. Anyway.
That's all. Right. So now this podcast is called Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show. When you think of nostalgia, what do you think of, or how you define nostalgia?
I think of things that made me happy when I was younger.
Yeah.
And that's really, it's for me, it's a lot of the old TV shows that I grew up with.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
It's a lot of the songs that, there's, I remember, the songs I was listening to in high school are the ones that I kept listening to, but, I think it's mostly the sitcom episodes. I mean, watching The Odd Couple over and over again, or Barney Miller. But I think it came, there's a real emotional response, and I think a lot of people sort of discount nostalgia. But in the middle of working on this book, I had to get a quadruple bypass operation.
Oh wow!
And when I was recovering, I would end up I was always afraid I'd fall asleep if I was watching something. So I ended up not wanting to watch anything new because my energy was so low. And so I was always going to watch something that I had seen before. So my bedtime ritual involved, putting on old Barty Miller episodes that were running on Antenna TV at the time. Even though I have the box set on DVD, it's always, airing at bedtime, so you watch it. So that would be, it would make me feel good because I knew, I'm going to enjoy this. But I also knew if I fell asleep, I'm not going to miss anything because I've seen it before. I know what I'll be missing. So that area of nostalgia really helped me recuperate because, I just didn't want to expose myself to anything new that I was going to miss something of.
There you go.
Right.
Thank you so much, Craig. It's been
thank you
so much.
We'd definitely love to have you back on in the future.
I would definitely love to do it.
Yeah,
Awesome.
thank you so much, Craig, for doing what you do. Keep up your great work. Thank you for being part of our childhoods, and you're worth it. And
you're worth it.
Once again,
for you.
Yes.
Once again, please be sure to check out the book Sam and Friends: The Story of Jim Henson's First Television Show, releasing September 24th. Highly recommend it.
Yes.
Craig, thank you for coming on. It's been wonderful.
My pleasure.
Thank you, folks, for joining us. This concludes another wonderful episode of Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show. Be sure to check us out on social media. All the links are going to be down below, and we
go
will
to
see
our
you
Instagram for our link tree.
Go to our Instagram,
website, everywhere.
Website, everywhere.
Or everywhere.
Yes, we will see you folks next week for another fun episode. Thanks for joining us, folks. You are worth it. Stay nostalgic. We'll see you next week.
You're worth it.
Goodbye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
You're worth it.
Bye. See you next time on another episode of Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show, where nostalgia comes alive. Be sure to follow us on social media and stream us wherever you find your favorite podcasts. And as always, remember that you are worth it and to always stay nostalgic. Bye-bye.